Guys, welcome back to another video. How to be an interesting man. It's a very important question, but we have to begin with what does it mean to be interesting? Think about it like this. If everyone's talking at the same time, are you saying something different from what everyone else is saying? Think about that because that is the difference. Imagine you're at an auditorium and everyone is standing up. You're not seeing, you don't have a vantage point any different from anybody else. So the advantage comes from your perception, from your individuation, the perception that you have of the things happening around you. So you have to be able to embed your perception on reality and vice versa. The reality that you see, you have to be able to perceive it and be able to explain it. And then how you perceive it is really, that's the interesting part, is how you're perceiving what is happening in real time or reflecting back, looking back on past transgressions or things that have happened in the past and then connecting them in a way that can be conveyed. You got to be able to weave these words together to tell a story. That is the most, that is the interest, right? That is where the intrigue comes from. So you got to think punchlines, think elevator speeches, quick and witty. And think about this. Answer this question. Be genuinely honest with yourself. Would you want to be stranded with yourself in an elevator? All right, you're stuck in an elevator. Are you going to be interested in being stuck there with yourself? Because if you're not, then you have to really think about, well, what could you do to be, to be a better person, right? So that if you are in that situation, you can not annoy the other person. That's something really to think about. Also too, it's not even the things that you say, but it's also the tempo, the tone. That really does matter. The volume, so that you're not just sounding like a geek that's talking about World War II tank technology. That is a little too deep for the average person. It's going to be a turnoff. Not many people are going to want to talk about tanks, during World War II. That's just not something people are genuinely that interested in. So you got to be aware of that. But the thing is too, you have to be adept at general information, but also be specific, the micro and the macro. You have to be able to invest in your interests and tell that to the world, show that to the world, showcase it, share it with everyone. Simple examples could be like just being very familiar with the flora and fauna of your local environment. Familiarize yourself with the pollinators, the seasons, speak to the birds, watch them, how they move about. I've just, just being an avid bird watcher, I just kind of see what they're up to. I see who's sleeping with who. I see who got dumped. I see who's making out with the next person, and you see these things and you're like, you think I'm talking about people, but it's like, no, I'm talking about birds. But the thing is, you have to, the world is full of magic and you have to just let it unfold. But if you're too distracted, if you're not willing to look at it, you're not going to find it. You're not going to see it. So you got to be open to finding those magical moments in the mundane, in the quotidian. So that's super important. And then the next question becomes, this is part two, is why should you be interesting? Sorry. The question is, well, why should you be interesting? That's a very important question. You have to understand, in a world inundated with information, with doom scrolling, if you will, I mean, it's really hard to stand out, right? You're essentially competing around fast moving, right, information, and that's quite a challenge. There is a lot of cognitive overload, and so to be able to stand out in the midst of all that is even more difficult now. And it's also just more important than ever, but it's also easier than ever, right? Because to have interest and to be interesting, there's a lot of things you can tap into now, a lot of flows of information that before you could maybe possibly visit like a still encyclopedia or an atlas, right? And that stuff was fixed, right? The information that was in there was just what was in there. You could read, tons of stuff, but it was fixed. Now the information is constantly flowing, evolving, changing to new things all the time. Um, the thing is too is like another reason why you should be interesting is that there's plenty of stale people that have really nothing to offer in terms of conversation. All you really got to do is go outside and you'll see what I'm talking about. I mean, you'll run into these people often, unfortunately, right? Pretty often. Um, and I would say it's a civic duty to be interesting. I mean, put it like that. It's your responsibility to be of interest. If no one else is being interesting, at the very least, you could offer to be the interesting person at the table or in the room, what have you. Um, there's a saying in Spanish. It's called to define someone that's uninteresting. It's called a huevo sin sal, so which is basically just an egg. Imagine a boiled egg without seasoning, and you can kind of understand um, why that idea takes hold, because it's like really that it's just someone that's bland and really plain and boring, and those kind of people are everywhere to be found, and then they wonder why they're single, and it's just like, well, if you haven't noticed, it's because you have nothing interesting to say to anyone. So then this is the most important part. Well, okay, fine, I understand what it is to be interesting, and I understand the importance of it. Well, how do I actually become interesting? And that is the most important thing. Some very simple things you can do is travel to different regions outside of your local environment, travel to national parks, be out in nature, go into the mountains, go anywhere outside of the built environment. Do that. If you could travel far and wide, that is ideal, but you want to be around people that are different from you so you can just get a taste of how people live in different places. That's also very important. Also flirt, man. Flirt with fatties. Flirt with, which is not hard to come by, right? There's fatties everywhere, right? Flirt with the fatties, flirt with old men, flirt with pretty girls, flirt with anybody, frankly. Anybody who's willing to listen. I think that's the gist of it. I think if you can be playful with words, I think if you can have a joy with the way in which you say things, that really does go a long way. The other thing is read also far and wide. Read random things and memoirs. I'm a really big fan of memoirs and novels, more so than anything you'll find on a bestseller list. Read the classics. Start there. I mean, there's a reason why they're classics, right? There's a reason for the categorization. Stick with that, and then go from there and branch out if you need to. That's also very important. Is just to read and get acquainted with different ideas. I remember one time I read Gabriel Garcia Marquez's book, The Brief Wonder. Wait, no, not The Brief Wondrous Life. The 100 Years of Solitude. And I remember him talking about how one of the characters was pissing and it smelled like asparagus. And I was like, that's crazy. I've never had asparagus, one. And two, I've never smelled my pee after eating asparagus. And then so I went and had asparagus, and then I smelled it and it was like, oh wow, this is just like what he said in the book. And I never forgot it. And yeah, I tried asparagus a few days after that, if not the next day. And I went to Colombia a few years after that, So these are the things that it opens you up to, opportunities to kind of, feel things and experience places that you otherwise wouldn't have if you hadn't opened up that book. So that's why it's important as well. The other thing is it's not what you say, it's how you say it. That is also very, very important. It's what will make you stand out from the crowd. And the other thing is too, is like, don't be afraid to speak up, say out of pocket things all the time. Do not read the room. Who cares? You will sometimes get it wrong, but you got to test yourself in the social arena. And if you don't know how far you can push it. I think that's what makes people interesting is that part, right? Is can you stand out from the crowd? And it's not because you're trying to be a showboat or you want to be extra or loud or over the top. It's more like I'm just myself and I'm willing to be vulnerable and open about it. And who cares if some people don't like it? But look, as many people that don't like it, there's going to be as many people that do like it, that do appreciate you for who you are. And that's what matters, right? You also want to have that element of surprise. Excuse me. People should not be able to figure you out. I think if they do, I think you're not interesting enough. I think you need to step it up in regards to that. Um, the other thing is too, people these days, unfortunately, are just not willing to explore their curiosities as much as they should and share them with the world. And that's ultimately what you should do. Like for example, I just recently saw um, American Psycho. It's crazy. I know it's a very old movie, but so now I'm just walking around the hallways and it's like, hey, Patrick Bateman, and people are like, who are you talking about? Or I'll be like, yo, I just got a reservation at Dorsey. Have you been there? And then people are like, oh, is that in West Hollywood? I'm like, yeah, sure, maybe it is, but you get the idea. Like any dumb stuff that I just like come across, I just like play with it and just use it as a way to get my foot into the door and have a real just small conversation, nothing major, and just turn it into something. But that only comes with practice. Like I've only gotten really quick with it, just playing around with different things. So you gotta be able to just shoot from the hip. It can't just be like these line. I mean, you can always rehearse things and say the same thing to different people. You could try that, but I've gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm just gonna try a bunch of things with a lot of different people and kind of just see what hits and see the reaction. And it's like, and if I don't get that desired result, it doesn't even matter because it's fun anyways. So I think maybe that's the takeaways. See it as a fun thing to do, to play around with these new ideas, new things, say things in a way that that makes sense to you, that's interesting to you, and typically that'll make a lot of sense because it's a lot easier to spot somebody that's uninteresting rather than to find someone that is interesting. So, anyways, I'll leave you with that. Have fun, cultivate your curiosities, go out there and share them with the world, and hopefully that'll make you a more interesting person. I'll see you in the next one.